Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan, and today my great friend Kari Hammerschlag is on the podcast. She is the Deputy Director of the Food and Agriculture Program at Friends of the Earth, where she has been for almost 12 years. Kari, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ted. It's great to be here.
How are you today?
Doing great. Yeah, it's a beautiful day here in sunny Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I am living right now.
What a great part of the world to live in. So let's just jump right in. Pretty tough times for your business now with the current administration in Washington, right?
Yeah, I think it's tough business for everybody, but yes, it is very challenging, and particularly challenging with the Secretary of Agriculture and Trump's tariffs that are killing soybean farmers and others. So yeah, lots of challenges right now.
When I was thinking about your job, I probably don't have this right, so I wanted to ask the question. It seems like you're working on agricultural policy, right? And that's got a lot to do with sort of supporting small and mid-sized farms. And then you also have this whole focus on education in the schools. Is that right? Those are two big areas.
Yeah, we do a lot of different things. The school food work that you were talking about, it's our climate-friendly food program, and that program is about fighting climate change by shifting institutional food purchasing. So about 50% of the food people consume comes from institutions, and school meals are a huge institution. They serve over 7 billion meals a day. And so school food is a huge leverage point for improving our food system, making it healthier, more sustainable, and more climate friendly. So that's what that's one of our flagship projects. I started about 7 years ago, and it's going really well. That is one program actually that has not been as affected by the Trump administration because it's a state. We focus primarily in California, and then we also do federal policy, which is always affected by what's going on in Washington. But our California school food program is doing really well. We work with over 100 school districts to help them serve more climate-friendly food, which is food that has a lower carbon and water footprint, plant-based food, organic, regenerative, and also working on reducing food waste.
Let's go all the way back. Doesn't this have its roots in quote unquote the Green Revolution, which was really getting rid of the family-sized farm and just have these massive agribusinesses? And at the time, I'm sure there was a great enthusiasm about the economies of scale, right? But are these the roots that we're still battling? I know it's the same in the energy sector, right?
Oh, it's actually worse now. Our food system, the agriculture policy in the U.S. And the billions and billions of dollars that our taxpayers, support, goes primarily to support chemical-intensive monoculture, heavily polluting farming monoculture systems, mostly soybean and corn, that provide feed for animals, for factory farms, feed for biofuels, and then ingredients for ultra-processed food. And so I think 4% of our subsidies are going to healthy food, fruits and vegetables, while the bulk goes to these large chemical-intensive, genetically engineered crops. And those crops are killing our bees, polluting our soil, and then, of course, the whole industrial livestock system. We can get into that as well. But it's a very heavily chemical-intensive agriculture system. And it's really sad to see how much, so much of our policy and funds are going to support this form of agriculture and not the healthy food that we all need. And we know that we're suffering from that. I think 60-70% of calories that people consume come from ultra-processed foods. So really? It's a big problem. We need to be investing in food that feeds people, local communities, local healthy food. And the current USDA is doing exactly the opposite right now.
And it's all about money, I take it.
Money in terms of big ag making a lot of money, yes.
Big corporations controlling farming,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we've driven, don't we have, what percentage of Americans are farmers now? Is it like 1%? I mean, hasn't it just dwindled down to almost nothing?
It's a very tiny percentage. I think it is less than 1%. I don't know the number actually, but I do know that
Yeah.
right now, as we speak, we're losing 60 farms a day. The farming sector is in crisis. They're in debt. They are having a lot of issues with labor, weather, now tariffs.
Yeah.
And our food and farming policies are absolutely broken. So we have a really serious issue with our food system, and Trump and this USDA is making it a lot worse.
And
So
what about this? What is MAHA? Make Americans Healthy Again? Is that something that came out of the Trump administration, or has that been going on for a while?
no, actually, it came about, I believe, when Kennedy made the move to back Trump,
Hmm.
and they wanted to create some kind of a movement that they could control within the bigger Republican Party, and so
Yeah.
they called it "Make America Healthy Again," and put forward a lot of ideas and some policies, I guess, around improving school food and getting rid of ultra processed food and supporting healthier regenerative agriculture. And they have some good goals. The MAHA movement on the food and agriculture side, I think, is quite aligned with a lot of the progressives. We've actually been working with some MAHA organizations around fighting pesticide liability shields. So right now there's a bill in Congress that would essentially give pesticide companies a free pass when they poison people with their pesticides. It would shield them from any liability, any ability to sue a pesticide company if you've been injured. And it's ironic because that's what Kennedy was working on back in the day. He was fighting Monsanto and glyphosate, and won a case that held Monsanto accountable. And now Bayer owns Monsanto, so it's Bayer and the Republicans are backing this pesticide liability shield. So we've been working with a whole range of groups across the left and right, with Cory Booker, Senator Booker, Booker's office, to get a bill introduced that would essentially allow anyone to sue a pesticide company if they cause them injury. So hoping for bipartisanship on that, looking for some Republicans to support that. But it's really ironic. Half of the MAHA agenda
Yeah.
around the food and agriculture policies are completely antithetical to what the Republican Party believes and what they're working on. So there's a lot of contradictions there. Yeah, hoping that MAHA will put more pressure on USDA and Congress to do better on food and agriculture, because we can talk more about the details, but
But this just affects these pesticides. I mean, unhealthy food affects all of us, right? I mean, it ought not be a partisan issue.
no, and at the grassroots base, it isn't. That's the thing, and that's what I'm hopeful about actually right now, is that we've been doing polling that shows that something like 89% of people want to see greater protections for
Hmm.
pesticides, greater protections for people from pesticides. Upwards of 70-80% want healthy school food. They want to see support for local agriculture. There's a lot of support among the base, and even among some of course, the MAHA leaders, and
Yeah.
for better food and farming policies. But what we're up against is corporate controlled food system, and they have more power. I would say that
Yeah.
the agrochemical companies and the big meat and dairy corporations have even more power than the fossil fuel industry. So you know about the fossil fuel industry and how
Yeah.
powerful they are. Well, the big food companies are even more powerful in many respects, and they have a stranglehold over our politicians. And so it's really important that we work, actually, I think, across the aisle at the
Yeah.
grassroots level to
Yep.
force change. And that's where there's some hope, because we do agree everybody wants healthier food. But right now, yeah, we don't have the right policies in place.
So you said everybody wants healthier food. So is it fair to say that there's nobody that's saying that foods that are laced with toxins are not causing health problems, right? I mean, everybody agrees, everybody can see this causal link between obesity, different forms of cancer, and what we're putting into our tanks, right? What we're eating.
Uh,
Or
I'd
there's some that
say
say no.
some of us definitely, like, I would say there's different, I think there's a lot of awareness about unhealthy food, processed food, and how that is affecting our health. And particularly, California just passed a landmark legislation to eliminate ultra processed food from school meals, which was extraordinary. Just passed about a month ago,
Okay.
or less than a month ago. There are bills across the country now to try to reduce processed food in school meals, which is very important, especially processed meat, I would say, because there's a lot of processed meat, which is very much directly related to cancer rates, higher cancer rates. But I think there's some disagreement about the role of pesticides in our health, even though it's documented that that pesticides have direct links to cancer and other
Yeah.
health issues. Parkinson's directly related to the use of paraquat, which is actually produced in China. ChemChina produces it. ChemChina exports it to the US because it's legal here, but it's illegal in China because they know how deadly it is. And there's like 70, 80 pesticides that are banned in other countries that are allowed in this country. So we are fighting that. We are trying to get more support. And interestingly, I don't know if you heard about the Maha Commission report that came out about a month and a half, came out in early September. This was a report that came out of an executive order asking the HHS, Health and Human Services, EPA, and USDA to develop a blueprint for how to make children healthy again, essentially. And they came out with a report kind of identifying some of the problems with children's health, and identified pesticides and toxic chemicals as a problem in the first report. And the second report was about how to solve the problems. And the second report basically said we need a PR campaign to tell Americans about how robust our regulatory process is at the EPA. And that happened after the White House had hundreds of meetings with pesticide lobbyists and agrochemical companies. So we didn't get any recognition in that report that we need to do anything different on pesticides. They're just doubling down on the current system, and actually the EPA is deregulating pesticides. They're making it easier for companies to
fast tracking pesticide approvals. And then I read your United We Eat article that just came out earlier this month, just a few weeks ago, and you talked about how I guess it's agribusinesses and the chemical companies are launching these PR campaigns suggesting that these toxins are actually safe. So just to confuse people even more.
Right. Right. It's just the same thing from the tobacco industry, right? They sow doubt and they try to obfuscate, and but people aren't buying it, Ted. They're not buying it. I mean, that is the good news. I do think that people are more aware than they've ever been about the toxic load that comes with our food, and people are concerned. But unfortunately, the healthier food, the organic food that's produced without chemicals, toxic chemicals, is often more expensive. And it's ironic that our taxpayer dollars are supporting the chemical intensive toxic food system, and then the farmers that are actually doing it the right way, they get very little support from the government.
Yeah. Well, we have so many questions for you, but what can we do? What can we as people that eat and just downright concerned citizens do? I mean, where is our power at this point?
Well, if I had a fork, our power is really the thing about that's different about, I think, food and other things that we consume. We have a lot more power about what we put in our bodies, right? We all eat three times a day, or two if you eat less often, but we all eat. And so we can all choose every day to support local farmers, to support as much as we can, shop at farmers markets, support local farmers. That's really important right now. Farmers are struggling. So whatever you can do to support your local farmer is really important. Asking your supermarket or restaurants, when you go out to eat, one of the things that we work a lot on is meat and dairy meat and dairy and industrial meat and dairy, trying to reduce consumption of industrial meat and dairy products. And, everyone should know that if you're eating meat, unless you know where that meat and dairy came from, it's coming from a big factory farm where animals are raised in massive quantities, in very unhealthy conditions. And they're pumped full of antibiotics, often growth promoters, hormones, and it's really very unhealthy in many ways. And also a lot of the toxic chemicals end up in the animal fats, right? So that's where toxic chemicals accumulate. So you have your dioxins, certain pesticides and heavy metals, and everything gets into that meat and dairy. And so it's really important that people be aware that you can shift that, so you can eat less of that. And if you eat less meat, you can afford better meat sourced from farmers that, raise their animals on pasture more regeneratively, more humanely. So I do think that consumers, so that's one piece, but we can't solve the problem just through changing our consumption, although that's really important. But wherever you are, you can ask restaurants to source more food, more organic, better food. You can ask your supermarkets to carry more of it. You can, if you have kids in school, you can work with the school system, your schools, to get better food into schools. And then, of course, just joining organizations like Friends of the Earth or other organizations that are working on food policy, so that you can be informed of opportunities in Congress to reach out to your member of Congress. Because we do have to be citizens on this, and it's really important that we communicate with our members of Congress about these issues. They do listen to some extent, and I think right now Democrats don't have as much power, so especially for people that live in Republican districts, to communicate with their Republican members about this, is really important. So that's those, and there's a lot of other, but those are some of the things, that people can.
And you are what you eat. I know. I'm terribly impressed by our local supermarket just down the street from me here, how much organic material is in the supermarket. And yes, there is a marginal cost. It costs more to eat organically, but think about all those health benefits downstream, right? Or later in your life, if you've shifted to a healthier diet. And I wanted to ask you, before Friends of the Earth, and this is going back, you were an environmental working group for 5 years. You authored the Meat Eater's Guide to Climate Change and Health.
Yeah.
And is there anything else you want to add to that about eating meat? That you've already made several important points about it, but what was the reaction to that guide?
Yeah, I think that guide, the Meat Eater's Guide to Climate Change and Health, was at that point, it was very important. It was probably one of the most important things I've ever done, actually, because it put the conversation of food and climate on the map. Because before then, and even today still, Ted, food is an overlooked solution to climate change, and a problem. Obviously, we cannot solve our climate crisis. We cannot achieve our climate goals if we don't significantly reduce the amount of meat and dairy consumption and shift to more sustainable production systems. So right now, if you look at all the models, if our current consumption patterns, meat and dairy consumption patterns, continue at the trajectory that they're on, meat and dairy the production of our agricultural system will occupy the entire carbon budget of our planet. Even if every single other sector reduced to zero emissions, if we don't change this trajectory, we're fried, basically. I mean, we will never avert the worst of the climate crisis. So it's I think one of the things that's really frustrating about this issue is that it's been documented over and over again. The Eat Lancet report just came out, 2.0, talking about how important it is for us to reduce. We're not talking about eliminating meat. It's just reducing the amount that we consume, and knowing that most of the meat that you consume comes from factory farms anyway. It's not good for you. So reduce, eat less and better. If we don't do that, we're never going to address the climate crisis. And it's frustrating that more clean energy, climate groups, environmental groups, foundations, they don't invest the resources that they need to be investing in diet shift, it's a solution for climate, but it's also a solution for biodiversity, for water scarcity, for
Yeah.
health, for
Yeah.
longevity. So yeah, very important issue. And I hope that I really hope that in my lifetime I'm going to see some meaningful progress
Mhm.
on this, because the U.S. eats 3 times more per capita than the rest of the world, and we can do with less. And a lot of it is processed meat, and that's
Yeah.
we know that is linked directly to colon cancer and other cancers. So.
I like what you say about diet shift. I have never heard that term before, and I also like the fact that you're not saying that everybody should just give up meat completely, but less of it, better quality. The stuff that you do eat, the meat that you do eat, better quality. Michael Pollan, author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, one of my favorite books, or my most eye-opening books I've ever read. And I love it at the end where he's asked, or maybe he was asked on Johnny Carson's show or something like that. He's asked, well, what diet do you recommend? And he's, oh, I'm not a doctor. I can never recommend this.
Right.
And what did he say? Well, finally he said, okay, 7 words: eat food, not too much, mostly vegetables.
Mostly
Mostly
plants.
vegetable.
Yes, mostly
Yeah,
plants. Yeah.
mostly plants. All right. So
Right.
it's a diet shift. It's not an absolute, don't necessarily need to absolutely give up something, right?
No, absolutely not. And keeping in mind that agriculture has the potential to be a huge part of the solution if we
Yeah.
shift the way we produce the food, because we can
Yeah.
store carbon in the soil. And if there are ranchers out there that are raising animals in much more sustainable ways, that are conserving soil, that are allowing for greater water absorption in the soil, so that you can kind of the drought, you can deal better with drought situations.
Yeah.
And the actual meat is healthier for you. It has lower omega-6s, so it's less inflammatory. But it's much harder to get that meat because we live in a system that is highly concentrated. I think there's 4 companies that control 86% of the beef market.
Wow.
And they're all producing meat in ways that are really unhealthy for people and animals and the planet. So it is challenging, but I'm a huge fan of less and better. And if you eat less, you can afford better. That's what I always say.
Yeah, well put. Now you've spent quite a bit of time focusing on the banks and trying to influence the banks to, I guess, not invest in sort of factory farming or the green revolution sort of type of agriculture. That sounds like a pretty tough duty, right? Working with the banks.
Yeah.
What can you say about that?
Yeah, well, you've done your homework. Yeah, so one of the campaigns, I've actually done 2 campaigns focusing on the multilateral development banks, primarily the World Bank, which funds development projects all over the world, using some of our taxpayer dollars. So back in the more than 30 years ago, I started a campaign called Women's Eyes on the World Bank, and it was all about how to get the banks to be investing more in projects that benefit women and gender equality, et cetera. And so I had quite a lot of experience working to influence the World Bank back, 30 years ago. And as I got more involved with this work on industrial animal agriculture, I was like, well, we should really try to get the World Bank and the multilateral development banks to stop investing in this industrial livestock system, which is the number one cause of deforestation in Latin America: beef. It's like 60-70% of deforestation is caused by
Really?
beef production. So it's a huge problem. And the banks themselves recognize the problem, and they even talk about it in many of their reports. And they have very strong climate policies and climate goals. And so we have launched, maybe about 4 years ago, Friends of the Earth worked with several other organizations globally to launch a global campaign called the Stop Financing Factory Farming campaign, to basically ask the World Bank and other multilateral development banks to stop investing in industrial livestock projects. And one of the first campaigns we worked on was actually targeting the Inter-American Development Bank, where we were urging them to not invest in Marfrig, which is one of the largest beef producers in the world. They had a project in Brazil, and Marfrig is responsible for a huge amount of deforestation there and land grabbing. human rights violations, pushing small farmers off their land. And we won. We got them to withdraw the loan, and that was like one of our first campaigns. So we were emboldened by that, and ever since, now the campaign has grown. I think there's 30, 40 organizations across the world that are working on it, and the bank is on notice. And I feel like we've delayed a lot of projects. And when the Biden administration was in power, we worked with the U.S. government to try to put more pressure on the International Finance Corporation, which is the arm of the World Bank that invests in corporations, and to get them to have better policies around these investments. And we're still in a big campaign and debate, big campaign with them, trying to stop them from doing that. And we just won we just won another huge case, but over at the Inter-American Development Bank, where that bank had been investing in a big poultry and pig multinational corporation in Ecuador that was polluting indigenous lands and completely ruined their river, the Perico River, which was kind of the river is life for them. It was very important culturally and also for bathing, for drinking, and it destroyed the river. And we just got a case. We took it to the it's called the Independent Accountability Mechanism at the Inter-American Development Bank, and they found that the IDB, the management there, had violated 7 of their policies, and with a lot of harm to indigenous communities. And so now we're in a situation where they have to kind of work with the community to try to clean up the river and make it better. So that was, at least we got that. It was they'd invested in that project like 3 times over the last 20 years, and the World Bank has also invested. So now we have a case over at the World Bank on that too. But
congratulations. So there is some light. There is some light. Some of the logic.
We're making some headway at the international level. We're making headway for sure. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. How did you, when you were a little girl, you probably never imagined that you would be promoting, rational food and agricultural policy as a career, right? How did you get into this? I know you studied Latin American studies and city and regional planning at UC Berkeley. You and I met at University of Vermont into political science, but what was it that drove you in this direction?
Well, it's interesting. It was a little bit of a circuitous route because I was really interested in food. I read Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lappé back in college, actually. And that's when I stopped eating meat. And that book was just extraordinary. It opened my eyes up to the massive amounts of resources that were going into producing beef, and how much we could feed, how many more people we could feed if instead of feeding animals, we fed food to people. And so that was kind of what got me really interested in food. And I was so interested that I actually, after I graduated from UVM, I drove out to San Francisco, and I worked for a year at Frances Moore Lappé's Institute. Back then it was called Food First, the Institute for Food and Development Policy. And I spent a year there getting educated, more educated than I ever was at UVM about development and hunger and poverty and democracy and all these things. So I guess that's kind of where I got my first interest in that. But then I ended up spending 15 years working in Latin America and working more on issues relating to indigenous peoples and women's rights and economic development, some rural development, but slowly made my way back because I was always interested in food production and worked a lot on fair trade and helped start something called the Fair Trade Federation back 30 years ago, and it's still going strong because I felt like it was so important to get producers fair prices for their products, and that if we just paid fair prices, then we wouldn't have to subsidize them with other programs. We could just give them fair prices, particularly women who are really underpaid. So that's kind of how I got into it and then I got more into fair trade, and then eventually made my way back to, well, instead of working internationally, we have serious problems in our own country around food and farming. And so I started probably about 20 years ago working domestically on food and agriculture. And the movement has just grown so much since I was involved, since I started, 20 years ago here.
Fantastic. And I'm really glad you brought up, famine and how this diet shift can go a long way to addressing some of the world's problems. It's just heartbreaking to see the famine issues in different continents. Crazy stuff. Um, yeah, thanks for what you're doing. And last question, we'll have to get together again. There's so many things to talk about. But last question, how do you keep balance in your life? You're putting all this energy out there. You're fighting the good fight, being quite effective. How do you? What's your way of maintaining balance so that you can be healthy and happy moving forward?
Well, honestly, it's really easy to say. I have a practice called Qigong. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's kind of similar to Tai Chi. It's an
Yep.
ancient Chinese practice. I think it's 4,000 years old. And I do it every day. It combines kind of gentle movement, breathing, intention, and I tried to meditate. I've been trying to meditate for like 30 years, and I've
Me
never
too.
succeeded.
Me too. I
And
can't
I
calm
just
down
couldn't
enough.
just sit, And then
Yeah.
I discovered Qigong about 7 years ago, and it's a beautiful practice. It gives you energy. It helps you sleep. It reduces all anxiety in your nervous system. It can take you off of drugs. It's really it's profound
Yeah.
medicine for the body, and that has been a saving grace. And thank God I discovered it a year before COVID. And so when COVID hit, we all had a lot more time on our hands. So I ended up doing
Yeah.
a lot of intensive Qigong practice. And now I do it every day. It's wonderful. So that's kind of,
Perfect.
besides getting into nature and, all the stuff, skiing, biking, I still love to be in nature, but
Yeah.
Qigong daily practice, and highly
Awesome.
recommend it.
Thanks so much for your time this morning.
You are welcome. It's great to be with you.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.